The wagon lurched to a stop so violently that Lydia Ashford's head snapped forward, and she knew before her father even spoke that another decision had been made for her, another path chosen without her consent, another piece of her life arranged like furniture in a room she would never truly own. "Get out," her father said, his voice flat and final as a coffin lid closing. "This is as far as we go together." Lydia's hands trembled in her lap, the worn fabric of her dress bunching between her fingers. They had been traveling through Nevada territory for 3 weeks, the landscape growing increasingly desolate as they moved north from Carson City. Her father had barely spoken to her since they left, his silence heavy with disappointment that she had refused to marry the banker's son back in Missouri. That refusal, the only choice she had ever dared to make for herself, had cost her everything. "Father, please," she whispered, hating the weakness in her voice but unable to stop it. "Where will I go?" "Should have thought of that before you shamed me," he replied, climbing down from the wagon. The November wind of 1875 cut across the high desert, carrying the scent of sagebrush and the promise of winter. "There's a town about 5 miles north. Tonopah Junction," someone said. "You got legs, you can walk." He threw her small trunk down onto the dirt road with such force that she heard something inside crack. Then he climbed back onto the wagon, took up the reins, and drove away without looking back. Lydia stood there watching until the wagon became a speck on the horizon, then disappeared entirely, swallowed by the vast Nevada wilderness. She was 21 years old, alone for the first time in her life, and terrified. The sun was already beginning its descent toward the distant mountains when she started walking, dragging her trunk behind her, because it was too heavy to carry. The road was barely more than 2 ruts carved into the rocky soil, winding between clusters of juniper and sage. Her shoes, already worn thin from the journey west, began to split at the seams within the first mile. By the time darkness fell, she had made perhaps 3 miles, and her hands were blistered from the trunk handle, her feet bleeding inside her ruined shoes. The temperature had dropped dramatically, and her thin shawl provided no protection against the cold. She kept walking because stopping meant freezing, and freezing meant dying, and some stubborn part of her refused to give her father the satisfaction. The moon rose full and bright, painting the desert silver. Lydia's breath came in ragged gasps, her legs shaking with exhaustion. She had just decided to abandon the trunk and continue without it when she heard the sound of footsteps, heavy and deliberate, coming from somewhere in the darkness off the road. Her heart seized with terror. She had heard stories about what happened to women alone in the wilderness. Bandits, desperados, wild animals, men who were worse than animals. She froze, unable to move or cry out, simply standing there like prey caught in lamplight. A figure emerged from behind a large boulder, and Lydia's first thought was that a bear had learned to walk upright. The man was massive, well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders so broad they seemed to block out the stars behind him. He wore buckskin clothing and heavy boots, and his dark hair fell past his shoulders, wild and untamed. Even in the moonlight, she could see the thick muscles of his arms, the solid strength of his frame. A rifle rested easily in the crook of one arm. "You lost." His voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together but not unkind. Lydia tried to answer but found she could not make her voice work. She simply nodded. The man came closer, moving with surprising grace for someone his size. Now she could see his face more clearly in the moonlight. He had strong, angular features, a jaw dark with several days' worth of beard, and eyes that seemed to reflect the moonlight like an animal's. He looked dangerous and wild and nothing like the civilized men she had known back east. "You heading to Tanapa Junction?" he asked. She found her voice, though it came out barely above a whisper. "Yes. That's still a good 2 miles from here. You will not make it tonight, not in those shoes." He nodded toward her feet, and she realized she had left a trail of blood on the pale dirt road. "Got a camp about a 1/4 mile off the road. You are welcome to rest there, get warm, eat something. I will take you into town come morning." Every rule Lydia had ever been taught screamed at her to refuse, to keep walking, that going anywhere alone with a strange man meant certain ruin. But her body was beyond exhaustion. The cold was seeping into her bones, and she could not feel her feet anymore. "How do I know I can trust you?" she asked. The man's expression did not change, but something flickered in his eyes. Respect, perhaps. "You do not," he said simply. "But you got no other options right now, and I am not the kind of man who leaves someone to freeze to death when I can help. Name is Flynn Ingram. Been living in these mountains for near about 8 years. I am not saying I am a gentleman, but I got my own code. You will be safe with me." He said it with such matter-of-fact certainty that Lydia found herself believing him. Or perhaps she simply wanted to believe him because the alternative was continuing to walk until she collapsed. "Lydia Ashford," she said. "And yes, thank you. I would appreciate shelter for the night." Flynn nodded once, then bent and picked up her trunk as though it weighed nothing at all, tucking it under one arm. "Follow me. Watch your step. The ground is rocky." He led her off the road and through a maze of boulders and scrub brush. Lydia stumbled several times, her exhausted legs barely supporting her, but each time Flynn seemed to sense it and would pause, waiting without comment until she caught up. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 15 minutes, they emerged into a small sheltered hollow, where a fire burned low between a ring of stones. A lean-to made of branches and canvas stood against the rock face, and 2 horses were picketed nearby, their eyes gleaming in the firelight. "Sit," Flynn said, gesturing to a log near the fire. "I will tend your feet." "I can manage," Lydia said automatically, the response so ingrained she did not even think about it. Flynn set down her trunk and looked at her steadily. "Maybe you can," he said, "but you do not have to. What do you want to do? Tend them yourself or let me help?" The question startled her so much that she nearly fell onto the log. What did she want? When had anyone ever asked her that? Her entire life had been a series of commands disguised as guidance. Do this, wear that, speak thus, think so. Even her refusal to marry had not truly been a choice, just a desperate negation. A single no in a lifetime of forced yeses. "I do not know," she admitted, and felt tears spring to her eyes at the confession. Flynn's expression softened slightly. He crouched down in front of the fire and added a few pieces of wood to it, building up the flames. "While you are deciding, I will get some water heating and gather some cloth for bandages. When you know what you want, you let me know." He moved around the camp with quiet efficiency, filling a pot with water from a canteen and setting it near the fire, pulling supplies from a pack. Lydia watched him, this strange wild man who asked her opinion as though it mattered, and felt something crack open inside her chest. "I would like your help," she said quietly. "Please. My hands are shaking too badly to do a proper job, and I do not want infection to set in." Flynn nodded and brought the supplies over, kneeling in front of her. "I am going to take off your shoes now," he said. "It is going to hurt." He was gentle, far more gentle than she would have expected from hands so large and rough, but he was right about the pain. Lydia bit her lip hard enough to taste blood as he eased off her ruined shoes and peeled away her stockings, which had stuck to the wounds. Her feet were a mess of blisters and raw flesh. "Christ," Flynn muttered. "How far did you walk?" "I am not sure. My father left me on the road this afternoon, maybe 3 miles." His hand stilled. Your father left you, I displeased him. The old shame rose up, but beneath it was something new, something that might have been anger. I refused to marry the man he chose for me. Flynn said nothing for a long moment, just sat there holding her bleeding foot in his massive hand. Then he looked up at her, and his eyes were hard. Any man who would abandon his daughter in the wilderness is no father. You understand me? Whatever he told you about shame or duty or disappointing him, that is his failing, not yours. Lydia stared at him, unable to speak. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. No one had ever suggested that her father might be wrong. Flynn returned his attention to her feet, carefully cleaning the wounds with warm water. This is going to sting, he warned, producing a small bottle. Whiskey. Best thing for preventing infection. You want me to go ahead, or do you want to do it yourself? You do it, she said, bracing herself. He worked quickly and efficiently, cleaning both feet and wrapping them in strips of cloth torn from what looked like an old shirt. When he was done, he sat back on his heels. You should not walk on those tomorrow. The town can wait another day or two until you are healed up some. But I need to find work, Lydia protested. I have no money, no provisions. I cannot impose on your hospitality. You are not imposing, I offered. Flynn stood and moved to the fire where he began preparing food. You hungry? Yes, Lydia admitted. I have not eaten since yesterday. When we eat, would you rather sit where you are or move closer to the fire, going to get cold tonight? Another question, another choice offered so casually. Lydia felt tears threatening again. Closer to the fire, please. Flynn came over and, without asking, simply picked her up and carried her to a spot nearer the flames, setting her down on a folded blanket. His strength was immense, and she had felt as light as a child in his arms. He smelled of wood smoke and leather and the wild mountain air. Thank you, she whispered. He just nodded and went back to cooking. Within a short time, he handed her a tin plate with beans, cornbread, and strips of what tasted like venison. It was simple food, but it was the best meal Lydia could remember eating, perhaps because it was the first meal no one had criticized her for how she ate it. They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling between them. Lydia watched Flynn covertly, studying this man who was so different from anyone she had ever known. Everything about him spoke of strength and self-reliance. The muscles in his forearms shifted and bunched as he ate, and his hands, despite their size and roughness, moved with precision and control. His long hair fell forward as he bent his head, and she found herself wondering what it would feel like to touch it. The thought shocked her. She had never had such an impulse about any man before. You said you have been in these mountains for 8 years. She asked, needing to break the silence before her thoughts went further down that dangerous path. Yes, came out here in 1867, right after the war ended. Flynn stared into the fire, his expression distant. I needed somewhere empty and wild, found it here. Do you not get lonely? Sometimes. He glanced at her. But I prefer my own company to most people's, present company excepted. A small smile tugged at Lydia's lips, the first genuine smile she could remember in months. What do you do out here? Hunt. Hunt, trap, guide the occasional party through the mountains. I know this territory better than most. Got a cabin about 10 miles north of here, higher up in the mountains. This is just one of my camps I use when I am ranging. It must be beautiful up there. It is. He was quiet for a moment. You want more food? No, thank you, that was plenty. She hesitated, then asked, Mr. Ingram, why are you being so kind to me? Flynn, he corrected. And I already told you, I got my code. Part of that is helping people who need it. He looked at her directly. Besides, something tells me you have not had much kindness in your life. Seems wrong to add to that. Lydia's throat tightened. You are right, I have not. Then that is going to change starting now. Flynn stood and went to his lean-to, returning with several blankets. "You will sleep by the fire. I will keep it going through the night. You need to stay warm. Tomorrow, if you feel up to it, maybe you can tell me what you are hoping to find in Tanapa Junction. Might be I can help with that too." He helped her arrange the blankets into a comfortable bed, then moved to the opposite side of the fire with his rifle and his own bedroll. Lydia lay there watching the stars wheel overhead, listening to the snap and pop of the fire, and felt safer than she had in years, which made no logical sense given that she was sleeping in the wilderness with a strange man, but sense seemed to have little to do with anything anymore. "Flynn." She called softly into the darkness. "Yes, thank you for everything. You are welcome, Lydia. Now sleep. Tomorrow is a new day." She closed her eyes and, despite everything, slept dreamlessly for the first time since leaving Missouri. Morning came cold and bright, frost glittering on the sage brush. Lydia woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon and opened her eyes to find Flynn crouched by the fire, cooking breakfast. He had tied his long hair back with a strip of leather, revealing the strong lines of his face more clearly. His buckskin shirt was open at the throat despite the cold, showing the solid muscle of his chest and the tanned skin of his throat. "Morning," he said, when he noticed she was awake. "How are your feet?" Lydia carefully moved them beneath the blankets. They were still tender but felt significantly better than the night before. "Much improved. The wrappings helped." "Good." He poured coffee into a tin cup and brought it to her. "You want sugar in this or just black?" "Sugar, please, if you have it." He added a spoonful from a small sack and handed her the cup. The coffee was strong and hot, and Lydia wrapped both hands around the cup, savoring the warmth. Flynn returned to the fire and continued cooking, and she found herself watching the play of muscles across his broad back as he moved. "I have been thinking about your situation," Flynn said without turning around. "Tanapa Junction is not much of a town. Maybe 100 people, most of them men working claims in the surrounding hills. Not a lot of opportunities for a woman on her own, if you understand my meaning." "I understand." Lydia's heart sank. "But I have to find something. I cannot go back. I am not saying you should go back." Flynn turned to face her, holding a plate of food. "I am saying you got other options if you want them. You need to think about what you actually want to do with your life now that you are free of your father." "Free," Lydia repeated, testing the word. "I do not feel free. I feel lost." "Sometimes those are the same thing, at least at first." Flynn brought her the food and sat down nearby. "So tell me, if you could do anything, be anything, what would it be?" No one had ever asked her such a question. Lydia stared at him, her mind blank. "I do not know. I was raised to be a wife and mother. I can sew and cook and manage a household. I can read and do figures. But I never thought about what I wanted." "Then maybe it is time to start thinking about it." Flynn ate his own breakfast, seemingly content to wait for her answer. Lydia chewed slowly, considering. What did she want? Freedom, certainly, safety. But beyond that, "I think I would like to be useful," she said slowly. "To do work that matters, to have my opinions valued, to make my own choices." She laughed, but it sounded bitter. "That probably sounds foolish." "Does not sound foolish at all." Flynn set down his plate. "Sounds human. Now I have a proposition for you, and I want you to really think about it before you answer. Do not say yes because you think you should, or because you are afraid to say no. I want you to actually consider what you want." "Understand," Lydia nodded, her heart beginning to race. "I need help at my cabin," Flynn said. "Winter is coming on hard and I got a lot of work to do to get ready. Firewood to split and stack, meat to smoke and preserve, repairs to make. I can do it alone, but having help would make it go faster and easier. You could stay with me through the winter, work for your keep. By spring, you will have time to figure out what you really want to do, Maybe save up some money because I would pay you fair wages for fair work. The cabin has 2 rooms, so you would have privacy. I give you my word I would not touch you or bother you in any way you did not want." He paused, his dark eyes steady on hers. "What do you think? Not what you think you should do. What do you want?" Lydia's mind raced. Every rule of propriety screamed that she should refuse, that going to live alone with a man in the wilderness would ruin her reputation beyond repair. But what reputation did she have left? Her father had abandoned her. She had no prospects, no family, no friends in this territory. And more than that, Flynn was offering her something no one else ever had: time. Time to heal, to think, to decide what she wanted from life. And there was something about him, something that made her feel safe despite his size and wildness. He asked her opinion. He waited for her answers. He treated her like her thoughts mattered. "I have some concerns," she said carefully. "Not because I do not trust you, but because I need to understand the situation fully." "Fair enough. What concerns? You said the cabin has 2 rooms. Where would you sleep and where would I sleep?" "You would have the bedroom. I would sleep in the main room by the fire. There is a bar for the bedroom door if you want extra security. And you promise you would not expect anything from me beyond work." "I promise. You would be my employee, nothing more." "Unless you wanted different, but that would be entirely your choice." Lydia took a deep breath. "Then yes, I want to accept your offer. I want to spend the winter at your cabin." Flynn's expression did not change, but she thought she saw relief flicker in his eyes. "All right then. We will leave this afternoon if your feet can handle sitting on a horse. You would not have to walk." "I think I can manage that." "Good." He stood and began packing up the camp. "One more question. You got any warmer clothes in that trunk? It gets cold up in the mountains, colder than down here." "Not really," Lydia admitted. "I have another dress and a coat, but nothing heavy." "Then our first stop is Tanapa Junction after all. We will get you proper winter gear before we head up." He paused in his work and looked at her. "You want to pick out your own clothes, or you want me to just get what I think you need?" Again with the questions, the choices. "I want to pick them out myself," Lydia said, and felt a small thrill at the assertion. Flynn nodded approvingly. "Then that is what we will do." They reached Tanapa Junction just after noon. It was exactly as Flynn had described. A small, rough settlement clustered around the crossroads of 2 dusty trails, surrounded by the stark Nevada desert. Most of the buildings were false-fronted wood structures that had seen better days. A handful of men lounged outside the saloon, watching with undisguised interest as Flynn rode in with Lydia sitting in front of him on his horse, her injured feet making it impossible for her to ride separately. Flynn had insisted she ride this way, asking if she would be more comfortable with him or behind him, and she had chosen in front, where she felt more secure. Being pressed against his solid chest, feeling the strength of his arms on either side of her as he handled the reins, had been both unsettling and oddly comforting. She could feel the warmth of his body through her thin dress, smell the masculine scent of him, and it made her acutely aware of him in a way that was entirely new to her. He pulled up in front of the general store and dismounted, then carefully lifted her down. The watching men whispered among themselves, but Flynn ignored them completely, his attention focused entirely on Lydia. "Can you walk a little if you lean on me?" he asked. "I think so." He offered his arm and she took it, feeling the solid muscle beneath the buckskin. Together they made their way into the store, a dim, cluttered space that smelled of coffee and dry goods. The proprietor, a thin man with wire-rimmed spectacles, looked up from his ledger. "Flynn Ingram, as I live and breathe. Have not seen you in months." "Been busy, Charles. This is Miss Ashford. She needs winter clothes." "The works. coat, boots, wool dresses, stockings, gloves, whatever she needs. Charles's eyebrows rose nearly to his hairline, but he was wise enough not to comment. Of course, miss, if you will follow me. Flynn squeezed her arm gently. Take your time. Get whatever you need. I am going to check in at the saloon and see if there is any news. You will come back? Lydia asked, then felt foolish for the question. I will come back, Flynn promised, his eyes serious. I will be right across the street. You need me, you just call. He left, and Lydia spent the next hour being outfitted by Charles, who proved efficient if somewhat taciturn. She chose a heavy wool coat in dark blue, 2 sturdy dresses in practical colors, warm stockings, long underwear that made her blush to purchase, thick boots lined with sheepskin, and leather gloves. Charles added several other items he deemed necessary for mountain living, including a warm nightgown and a knitted shawl. When everything was wrapped and ready, Lydia asked hesitantly, "How much do I owe?" Mr. Ingram said to put it on his account. "But I should pay for my own things." Charles gave her a look that might have been pitying. "Miss, Flynn Ingram is one of the most honorable men I have ever met. If he is outfitting you for winter, that means he is taking responsibility for you, and he does not do that lightly. Let him do what he thinks is right. You can settle accounts with him however you see fit later." Lydia nodded slowly, understanding that there was more being said than the words themselves conveyed. Flynn was publicly claiming her as someone under his protection, which in a place like this meant something important. Flynn returned shortly after, accompanied by another man, smaller and wiry with intelligent eyes. "Lydia, this is Doc Emerson. I asked him to take a look at your feet, make sure they are healing proper." "That is not necessary," Lydia started to say, but then stopped herself. Was it necessary? Maybe not, but did she want the reassurance of a doctor's opinion? Yes, she did. "Actually, thank you, I would appreciate that." Doc Emerson smiled. "Well now, that is refreshing. Most folks argue with me. Let's have a look." He examined her feet right there in the store, Flynn standing nearby with his arms crossed, radiating protective energy. The doctor was gentle and thorough. Flynn did good work with these. Keep them clean and wrapped for another few days. Try not to walk too much, and they should heal up fine. No infection that I can see. "Thank you, doctor. What do I owe you?" "Already settled," Flynn said before the doctor could answer. "You ready to go, or you need anything else while we are here?" Lydia thought about it. "I would like to post a letter if possible." "There is a postal office in the saloon. Who you writing to?" "My aunt in Missouri. She is my mother's sister, and she always treated me kindly. I want to let her know I am alive and well in case my father tells her otherwise." Flynn nodded. "Good idea. You want me to leave you private while you write, or does it matter?" "Privacy would be appreciated." "Then I will load up your new things and see to the horses. You take your time." He carried her across the street to the saloon, which doubled as the town's informal gathering place, and settled her at a table in the corner with paper, pen, and ink. Then he moved away to give her space. Though she noticed, he positioned himself where he could see her clearly, and where anyone who might approach her would have to go through him first. Lydia wrote carefully, choosing her words with precision. She told her aunt about her father's abandonment, but also about Flynn and his offer of work and shelter. She did not go into detail about her situation, knowing that her aunt would worry, but she wanted someone, somewhere, to know where she was, and that she was safe. She provided the general store as a return address, noting that she would check for letters when she came into town. When she was done, Flynn took the letter and paid the postage, then carried her back out to his horse. Her packages were tied securely behind the saddle, and a second horse, laden with additional supplies, was tied to Flynn's mount. "That is a lot of provisions," Lydia observed. "Winter supplies," Flynn said. Got to stock up when we can. The trail to the cabin gets impassable once the heavy snows start. He mounted and reached down for her. You ready? Yes. He pulled her up in front of him again, settling her carefully against his chest. It is about a 3-hour ride. You get uncomfortable or need to stop, you tell me. I will. They rode out of Tanapa Junction heading north, climbing steadily into the foothills of the mountains. The landscape changed gradually from desert scrub to scattered pine and juniper, the air growing cooler and cleaner. Lydia found herself relaxing against Flynn's solid warmth, lulled by the steady rhythm of the horse's gait. You awake? Flynn asked after they had been riding for about an hour. Yes, just thinking. About what? About how strange it is that 2 days ago I thought my life was over, and now I feel like maybe it is just beginning. She felt him shift slightly, his arms tightening fractionally around her. That is a good way to look at it. You are brave, you know that? I do not feel brave. I feel terrified. Being brave does not mean you are not scared. It means you do it anyway. He paused. You want to stop and rest or keep going? Keep going. I want to see this cabin of yours before dark. Yes, madam. They climbed higher, following a trail that was barely visible in places, winding through stands of pine and aspen. Lydia saw a deer watching them from the trees and once a golden eagle soaring overhead. The beauty of it took her breath away. She had never been in mountains before, and the wild grandeur of it spoke to something deep in her soul. It is magnificent, she breathed. It is home, Flynn replied simply. The sun was touching the western peaks when they finally crested a rise and Lydia saw the cabin. It was larger than she had expected, solidly built of logs with a stone chimney at one end. It sat in a small clearing surrounded by towering pines, with a stream running nearby. A shed and small corral stood to one side, and stacks of firewood were already piled against the cabin walls. Oh, Lydia said softly. Flynn, it is beautiful. Glad you think so. She heard pleasure in his voice. Built it myself, every log. Took me 2 years to get it the way I wanted. He dismounted and helped her down, then unlocked the cabin door and carried her inside. The interior was dim until he lit several lanterns, revealing a surprisingly comfortable space. The main room had a large stone fireplace, a sturdy table with benches, shelves lined with books and supplies, and a rope bed in one corner with a thick mattress. Everything was clean and well organized, not what she had expected from a bachelor's dwelling. Bedroom is through there, Flynn said, nodding to a door on the far wall. Let me get a fire going, then I will show you around proper. He worked quickly, building up a fire in the fireplace and lighting more lamps. Then he opened the bedroom door and carried her through, setting her carefully on the bed. This room was smaller but cozy, with a real bed frame, a chest of drawers, a washstand, and a window that looked out onto the forest. Hooks on the wall served as a wardrobe. Previous owner left some of this furniture, Flynn explained. I bought the cabin from a family heading back east. They wanted to travel light. He gestured around. You can arrange things however you want, make it your own. Door has a bar here, see? You can lock it from inside if you want. I do not think I will need to, Lydia said quietly. Flynn looked at her for a long moment. Maybe not. But the option is there. Now I am going to unpack the horses and bring in your things. You rest your feet. He left, and Lydia sat on the bed, looking around her new space. It was clean and simple, but it was hers, entirely hers. She could close the door and be alone or open it and seek company. The choice was hers. The thought was intoxicating. Flynn made several trips, bringing in all her packages and the supplies from town. Then she heard him outside, tending the horses and securing them in the shed. When he came back in, he was carrying a bucket of fresh water from the stream. "You hungry?" he asked. "Starving," Lydia admitted. "Good, I will make us some supper. You want to stay in there and rest, or come out here and keep me company? Either is fine." "I would like to keep you company if I may." "You may." He came into the bedroom and offered his arm. "Come on then." He helped her to the table and settled her on the bench with her feet propped up on a wooden crate, padded with a folded blanket. Then he set about preparing the meal with the same quiet efficiency she had observed at his camp. He clearly knew his way around a kitchen, and she watched with interest as he sliced salt pork, boiled potatoes, and made gravy. "You cook very well," she observed. "Had to learn. It is either that or starve up here." He glanced at her. "You know how to cook?" "Yes. My mother taught me before she died." "How old were you when you lost her?" 14. "She had pneumonia." "That must have been hard." It was. "She was the only person who ever really listened to me. After she died, my father became harder, more rigid. Everything had to be done his way." Lydia watched Flynn work. "May I ask you something personal?" "Sure." "You said you came here after the war. Did you fight?" Flynn's hands paused briefly in their work. "Yes, Union Army, 3 years. Did things I am not proud of, saw things I would like to forget, came here to find some peace." "Did you find it?" "Most days." He brought 2 plates to the table and sat down across from her. "Some things you cannot outrun, but you can build a new life around them, make different choices going forward." They ate in companionable silence for a while. The food was simple but good, and Lydia felt warmth spreading through her from both the meal and the fire. This cabin, this moment, felt more like home than anywhere she had been in years. "Tomorrow I will start on the work," Flynn said as he cleared the dishes. "Lot to do before the first snow. You should rest your feet another day at least. After that, you can help if you feel up to it, but no pressure. You heal at your own pace." "What kind of work needs doing?" More firewood chopped and stacked, chinking between the logs checked and repaired where needed, meat to smoke, more water hauled from the stream to fill the barrels, greens gathered while they are still available. Regular daily stuff too, cooking, cleaning, laundry. It is a lot for one person. "I can help with all of that," Lydia said eagerly. "I may not know mountain living, but I can learn." Flynn smiled, a real smile that transformed his face from stern to almost boyish. "I believe you can. You strike me as someone who does not give up easy." "I suppose I must be, or I would not have defied my father." "What was he like?" "Your father," Lydia considered the question. "Controlling. Everything had to be done exactly his way, on his schedule, by his rules. My mother balanced him somewhat, but after she died there was no buffer. He decided when I woke, what I wore, what I ate, who I spoke to, what I read. When I turned 18, he started looking for a husband for me. He found one when I was 20, a banker's son, 43 years old, twice widowed. I was expected to be grateful." "Were you?" "No, I met him twice. He looked at me like I was livestock he was considering purchasing. When my father announced the engagement, I refused. It was the first time I had ever directly defied him." She looked down at her hands. "He was furious, said I was willful and ungrateful. He decided to take me west to live with his brother in California, said a year of hard work would teach me obedience. But somewhere along the road he changed his mind, just left me there." "He is a fool," Flynn said flatly, "and a coward. Perhaps, but he was also my father. Part of me keeps thinking I should feel guilty." "Do you?" Lydia thought about it honestly. "No, I feel relieved. Is that terrible?" "It is honest." Flynn stood and banked the fire for the night. "You should get some sleep. Tomorrow you can start exploring the place, getting familiar with everything. No rush on any of it." "Flynn." "Yes, thank you for all of this, for asking me what I want. You have no idea what that means to me." He looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his dark eyes. "You are welcome, Lydia. Sleep well." He helped her to the bedroom, wished her good night, and closed the door, leaving her alone. Lydia changed into her new nightgown, luxuriously warm after her thin Eastern clothing, and climbed into bed. Through the door she could hear Flynn moving around, settling in for the night. She felt safe, truly safe, for the first time since her mother died. And something else too. Something warm and fluttery in her chest whenever she thought about Flynn, about his strength and gentleness, about the way he looked at her like she mattered. It was a feeling she had never experienced before, and she was not entirely sure what to do with it. But she had time to figure it out. All winter long, the next several days fell into a comfortable routine. Lydia rested her feet as instructed, spending her time getting familiar with the cabin and its surroundings. Flynn worked outside during the day, chopping wood, making repairs, hunting. But he always stopped regularly to check on her, to ask if she needed anything, to see what she wanted for the next meal. He asked her opinion on everything. Did she prefer the stew or roasted meat? Would she rather have the lamp on the table or the shelf? Should they eat early or late? Did she want him to leave the bedroom door open for warmth or closed for privacy? Every decision, large or small, he gave her a choice. At first, Lydia found it overwhelming. She was not used to deciding things. But Flynn was patient, never pushing, always waiting for her answer. Gradually, she began to realize something profound. There were no wrong answers. Whatever she chose was fine with him. He genuinely wanted to know her preferences, and he respected them. It was intoxicating. By the fourth day, her feet had healed enough that she could walk without pain. She insisted on helping with the cooking, and Flynn did not argue, just asked what she wanted to make and provided whatever supplies she needed. They worked together in the kitchen, and Lydia discovered she enjoyed it in a way she never had before. There was no criticism, no corrections, no judgment. Flynn simply appreciated the food and thanked her for her efforts. "You are a fine cook," he said after dinner that night. "Much better than me." "You are not bad yourself," Lydia replied, "but I enjoy it. It feels different here." "Different how?" "Back home, cooking was a chore, something I was required to do perfectly or face criticism. Here it is just cooking, something useful that we both need." Flynn nodded thoughtfully. "Everything is easier when it is not wrapped up in someone else's expectations." "Is that why you came here?" "To escape expectations, partly. After the war, people expected me to go back to farming, to settle down, to pretend everything was normal. But I was not the same person who left. I needed space to figure out who I had become." He looked at her. "Sounds like you are doing something similar." "I suppose I am. Figuring out who Lydia Ashford actually is beneath all the rules and requirements." "Who do you think she is?" Lydia considered the question. "I am still learning, but I think she is stronger than I gave her credit for, and maybe a little bit brave." "More than a little," Flynn said quietly. Their eyes met across the table, and something passed between them, something electric and unspoken. Lydia felt her breath catch, felt warmth bloom in her chest. Flynn held her gaze for a long moment, then looked away, clearing his throat. "I should check the horses," he said, standing abruptly. "You need anything before I do?" "No, I am fine." He grabbed his coat and went outside, and Lydia sat alone at the table, her heart pounding. Something was growing between them, something she had never felt before. It scared her and excited her in equal measure. The next morning dawned cold and gray, with the smell of snow in the air. Flynn was up before dawn as usual, and Lydia woke to the sound of him building up the fire. She dressed quickly in one of her new wool dresses and went out to the main room. "Morning," Flynn said, looking up from the fireplace. "Storm coming. I need to make sure everything is secure before it hits. You want to come with me or stay inside where it is warm?" "I will come with you," Lydia said immediately. "I should learn what needs to be done." Flynn smiled. All right then. Bundle up. She put on her new coat, gloves, and boots and followed Flynn outside. The world was gray and waiting, the air so still it felt like the mountains were holding their breath. Flynn showed her how to check that the firewood was properly covered, how to secure the shutters on the windows, how to make sure the shed door was latched tight so the horses would be protected. Snow up here is not like snow in Missouri, Flynn explained as they worked. Can come fast and heavy, bury everything in hours. We could be snowed in for days or even weeks. That is why we stock up so much beforehand. Are we prepared? We are. Got enough food and fuel to last months if need be. We will be fine. He paused in his work and looked at her. You scared? Lydia thought about it. No, I trust you. Something flashed in Flynn's eyes, some emotion too quick to name. Good, I will keep you safe, Lydia, I promise you that. I know you will. The snow started falling just after noon. Light flakes at first, then heavier and heavier until the world outside the windows became a wall of white. Flynn and Lydia spent the afternoon inside, working on various tasks. Flynn repaired a worn harness while Lydia mended one of his shirts that had torn. They worked in comfortable silence, the kind that speaks of ease rather than awkwardness. You did not have to mend that, Flynn said at one point. It is old anyway. I wanted to. It is still serviceable, and besides, it gives me something useful to do. You do plenty that is useful, but thank you. As evening fell, the wind picked up, howling around the cabin and driving the snow nearly horizontal. Flynn made supper and they ate by lamplight, the storm a constant presence beyond the walls. Tell me about your life before the war, Lydia asked as they lingered over coffee. Where did you grow up? Missouri, actually. Not far from St. Louis. My family had a farm, wheat and corn mostly. I was the youngest of 4 boys. Flynn stared into his coffee. They are all dead now. My oldest brother died at Shiloh, the next one at Gettysburg. The third caught dysentery and died in a field hospital. My parents both passed while I was away fighting. Oh, Flynn, I am so sorry. Long time ago now. But she could hear the old grief in his voice. What about you? Any siblings? No, just me. I think that made it worse, actually. All my father's focus was on me, all his expectations. There was nowhere to hide. Did you have friends? Not really. My father did not approve of most girls my age, said they were frivolous and would be bad influences. I had a few cousins I was close to when I was younger, but we lost touch as we got older. Lydia looked down at her cup. It was a lonely life. I just did not realize how lonely until now when I have something to compare it to. You are not lonely now. No. Even though it is just the 2 of us up here, I feel less alone than I ever did in a house full of people. Flynn met her eyes. I know what you mean. I have been alone in these mountains for 8 years, but I have not been lonely since you arrived. The admission hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Lydia's heart raced. She wanted to say something, to acknowledge what was growing between them, but she did not know how. All her life she had been taught to wait, to let men take the lead, to never speak her own desires. But Flynn had been teaching her something different, showing her that her wants and opinions mattered. Flynn, she started, then stopped, losing courage. You what? His voice was gentle. I am glad I am here, with you. I know this arrangement was supposed to be just for work, but it has become more than that for me. You have become. She struggled for the right words. Important. Flynn set down his coffee cup carefully. You have become important to me too, more than I expected. More than I probably should allow, given our situation. What do you mean? I mean that you are here because you needed help, not because you chose me specifically. When spring comes, you will have options. You can go back east, go on to California, go anywhere you want. I do not want you to feel obligated to me just because I helped you. Lydia stared at him, suddenly understanding. You think I would stay out of obligation, that I am only being kind to you because you gave me shelter, are you not? No, she stood up, her emotions finally boiling over. Flynn, do you really not see it? I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. Back home, men courted me because my father approved of them or because they wanted a docile wife they could control. But you ask me what I want. You listen to my opinions. You treat me like an equal partner even though you have all the power in this situation. You are strong and capable and kind, and yes, I am grateful for your help, but that is not why I care about you. Flynn stood too, his expression intense. You care about me. Yes, you impossible man. I care about you. Lydia felt her face flush. And I know that is probably improper and forward, and I know you probably do not feel the same way, but you asked and I am telling you the truth. I care about you. Very much. For a moment, Flynn just stood there, looking at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Then he crossed the room in 3 long strides and stopped just in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. I need you to understand something, he said, his voice low and rough. I have been alone for a long time. I came here to be alone because I did not think I could be around people anymore after the things I saw and did in the war. But then you walked into my life, bleeding and abandoned and brave, and something changed. You changed me, made me remember what it felt like to care about someone, to want to protect someone, to think about a future instead of just surviving. He raised one large hand and gently, so gently, cupped her face. I care about you too, Lydia, more than care. But I needed to know you were choosing this, choosing me of your own free will, not because you felt trapped or obligated. I am choosing, Lydia whispered, her heart soaring. I choose you, Flynn, I choose this. Then can I kiss you? I have wanted to for days, but I would not do it without asking first. Lydia almost laughed at the question, so perfectly Flynn, still giving her choices even now. Yes, please, yes. He lowered his head slowly, giving her time to change her mind, but she did not want to change her mind. She wanted this, wanted him, more than she had ever wanted anything. His lips met hers softly at first, almost hesitant, and then with more certainty as she responded, her hands coming up to grip his broad shoulders. His arms came around her, pulling her close against his massive frame, and Lydia felt the strength of him, the solid reality of him, and thought that this was what safety felt like. This was what being chosen felt like. This was what love felt like. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Flynn rested his forehead against hers. I want you to stay, he said quietly. Not just for the winter. Forever. But I will not ask that of you yet. It is too soon and you need more time to figure out what you really want from life. What if what I want is you? Then you have me. But let us take our time, do this right. Court you proper, let you be sure. Lydia smiled against his chest. You are a good man, Flynn Ingram. I am a man trying to be good. There is a difference. He kissed the top of her head. We should get some sleep. Storm is still raging. They parted reluctantly, Flynn banking the fire while Lydia went to her bedroom. But she left the door open, and as she lay in bed listening to the storm, she could hear Flynn settling into his own bed in the main room, and somehow the sound was comforting, connecting them even in sleep. The storm lasted 3 days. For 3 days, the world outside the cabin was nothing but white and wind, the snow piling up higher and higher against the walls. But inside, Lydia and Flynn created their own world, warm and safe and increasingly intimate. They talked for hours, sharing stories about their lives, their dreams, their fears. Flynn told her about the war, about the things that still haunted him, about why he had needed the silence of the mountains. Lydia told him about her mother, about the books she had loved, about the small rebellions she had staged against her father's control. They worked together, Flynn teaching her mountain skills and Lydia teaching him finer points of cooking and household management. They played checkers with a set Flynn had carved from wood. They read aloud to each other from Flynn's surprising collection of books. And sometimes they simply sat together, not talking, just being, and those moments were as precious as any. Flynn kissed her again on the second day of the storm, and this time there was less hesitation and more certainty on both sides. He never pushed for more than kisses, always respectful of boundaries, but the kisses themselves were enough to leave Lydia breathless and wanting. On the third day, as the storm finally began to break, Lydia woke to find Flynn already up and staring out the window. "What is it?" she asked, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders against the cold. "Look." She came to stand beside him and gasped. The world had been transformed. Everything was buried under at least 3 feet of snow, drifts piled even higher against the cabin walls and trees. The sky was clearing, revealing patches of brilliant blue, and sunlight sparkled off the snow like diamonds. "It is beautiful," she breathed. "It is. And it is going to take me most of the day to dig us out." Flynn looked down at her. "You want to help or stay inside?" "I want to help." They spent the morning shoveling snow, clearing paths to the shed and the stream, digging out the door and windows. It was hard work, and Lydia was exhausted within an hour, but she kept going, determined to pull her weight. Flynn watched her with something like pride in his eyes. "You are tougher than you think," he said as they stopped to rest, both of them breathing hard. "I am learning," Lydia replied. "You are a good teacher. You are a good student." By afternoon, they had the essential paths cleared, and the horses were fed and watered. Flynn went hunting and returned with 2 rabbits, which Lydia skinned and dressed with only a little squeamishness. She was learning to do things she never would have imagined back in Missouri. That evening, as they ate rabbit stew by the fire, Flynn said, "I need to check my trap lines tomorrow. It is about a half-day's journey, so I would be gone most of the day. You all right staying here alone?" Lydia's first instinct was to panic, but she pushed it down and thought about it honestly. "I think so. What would I need to do while you are gone? Keep the fire going, watch the horses, stay warm. If anything seems wrong, just wait for me to get back. Do not try to handle it yourself." "All right. What if you do not come back?" "I will come back," Flynn said with absolute certainty. "But if something did happen and I was not back by dark, there is a signal horn hanging by the door. 3 blasts and the nearest trapper would come check on you. His cabin is about 5 miles east." "You have thought of everything." "I try." He reached across the table and took her hand. "You trust me with my life." Flynn left before dawn the next morning, and Lydia found herself alone in the cabin for the first time. At first, the silence was unsettling, but she quickly filled it with activity. She cleaned the cabin thoroughly, did laundry and hung it to dry near the fire, baked bread, and even started a new shirt for Flynn from cloth she found in his supplies. She discovered that she did not mind being alone, not really. She was not lonely because she knew Flynn would return. There was a difference between solitude and loneliness, and for the first time in her life, she understood it. Flynn returned just before sunset, cold and tired but carrying a string of furs and several pounds of venison. His face lit up when he saw her, and Lydia realized that he had been worried about leaving her alone, worried that she might not cope. "How was your day?" he asked, setting down his burdens. "Good, actually, productive. I made bread." He looked at the loaves cooling on the table and smiled. "You did well." "So did you," she gestured to the furs. "Good hunting." "Good enough. These will bring decent money when I take them to town in the spring." He paused. "I missed you." "I missed you too," Lydia admitted. "The cabin felt empty without you." Flynn crossed to her and pulled her into his arms, and Lydia went willingly, breathing in the scent of cold air and pine and Flynn himself. "I was thinking while I was out there," he said quietly. "About the future, about what I want." "What do you want?" "I want you to marry me." Lydia's heart stopped, then started again, racing. She pulled back to look up at him. "What?" "I know it is too soon. I know you need more time, but I had to say it, had to tell you what I am feeling." Flynn's dark eyes were intense on hers. "I love you, Lydia. I have never said that to any woman before, but it is true. I love you, and I want to marry you, and I want to spend my life asking you what you want and doing my best to make you happy. But I will wait as long as you need." No pressure, no rushing, I just needed you to know. Lydia felt tears spring to her eyes. "You love me. I love you." "I love you too," she whispered. "I did not know how to say it, but I love you, Flynn. You are the best man I have ever known. Then you will think about marrying me." "When you are ready." "I do not need to think about it," Lydia said, feeling absolutely certain. "Yes, I will marry you. I want to marry you." Flynn stared at her. "You are sure? You are not saying yes just because I am the only option. I am saying yes because you are the best option. Because you are everything I never knew I wanted. Because you make me feel strong and safe and valued." She reached up and touched his face, feeling the roughness of his beard under her palm. "I choose you, Flynn. Freely and completely I choose you." He kissed her then, deep and thorough, and Lydia kissed him back with all the love and certainty in her heart. When they finally broke apart, Flynn was smiling, really smiling, and she thought she had never seen anything more beautiful. "We should do this proper," he said. "Wait until spring, let me court you right, have a real wedding in town with witnesses. If that is what you want." "What do you want?" Flynn asked, and she laughed because of course he would ask. "I want whatever makes you happy." "No, really, what do you want?" Lydia thought about it seriously. "I want to be married to you. I do not care much about the details. We could go to town tomorrow and find someone to marry us, or we could wait until spring for a bigger celebration. Either way is fine with me, as long as the end result is the same." "The end result being that you become Mrs. Flynn Ingram." "Yes." Flynn pulled her close again, tucking her head under his chin. "Then we wait until spring. Give people time to get used to the idea of us. Do it proper so no one can ever say you were rushed into anything. Let me give you the wedding you deserve." "I deserve you," Lydia said. "Everything else is just details." Winter settled in for good after that, and the mountain became a world of white and silence. Flynn and Lydia fell into a comfortable rhythm, working together through the short days and long nights. They were engaged now, officially promised to each other, and somehow that made everything even better. Flynn continued to ask her opinion on everything, and Lydia continued to discover her own preferences and desires. She learned she liked her coffee strong and sweet, preferred blue over green, enjoyed reading more than sewing, had a talent for making bread, and did not mind the isolation of mountain living nearly as much as she had feared. She was becoming herself, layer by layer, choice by choice. They slept separately still, Flynn insisting on propriety until they were married, but they spent every waking hour together. He taught her to shoot, to track animals in the snow, to read the weather. She taught him to dance, to appreciate poetry, to make proper pie crust. They learned each other's rhythms and habits, likes and dislikes, and found that they fit together remarkably well. In late December, a week before Christmas, Flynn went out hunting and returned with a small pine tree which he set up in the corner of the cabin. "Thought we should celebrate," he explained. "Make decorations, have a proper Christmas. What do you think?" "I think that sounds wonderful," Lydia said, delighted. They spent the evening making decorations from whatever they could find. Strings of dried berries, paper chains from old newspaper, small carved animals Flynn whittled from scrap wood. It was simple and rustic, and the most perfect Christmas preparation Lydia had ever experienced. On Christmas morning, Flynn gave her a present wrapped in brown paper. A beautiful fur cloak he had made from his trap-line catches, soft and warm and perfectly sized for her. "For when we ride into town," he explained, "so you will be warm." Lydia gave him the shirt she had been working on and also something else, a small sketch she had drawn of the cabin and the mountains. "So you can remember this winter," she said. "Our first winter together." Flynn looked at the drawing for a long time, his expression unreadable. Then he pulled her into his arms and held her tight. "I do not need a drawing to remember," he said quietly. "This winter changed my life. You changed my life. You changed mine too." They spent Christmas Day together, just the two of them, cooking a feast from their stores and sitting by the fire telling stories. It was simple and quiet and perfect, and Lydia thought that this was what happiness felt like. Not grand gestures or expensive gifts, but this: being with someone who loved you, who valued you, who gave you choices and respected your answers. January brought more snow and temperatures so cold that ice formed on the inside of the windows. Flynn and Lydia stayed close to the fire, reading and talking and planning their future. They discussed where they would live after the wedding. Flynn wanted to stay in the mountains, at least primarily, but was willing to spend part of each year in town if Lydia wanted. She found, to her surprise, that she did not want to leave the mountains at all. She loved the solitude and beauty, the simplicity and challenge of it. "Are you sure?" Flynn asked when she told him this. "It is a hard life up here, lonely sometimes. No society, no entertainment, just work and weather. I am sure. This feels like home to me in a way nowhere else ever has. Besides, I have you. That is all the company I need." Flynn kissed her softly. "You say that now, but after a few years you might change your mind. If you do, we can adjust." "We can always adjust. Always asking, always flexible," Lydia said with a smile. "You really are extraordinary, you know that. I just try to treat you the way you deserve to be treated, the way everyone should be treated. Well, it is working. I have never been happier in my entire life." February came, and the worst of the winter was behind them. The days began to lengthen, and occasional warm spells suggested that spring was not too far away. Flynn started talking about their trip to town, about finding a preacher, about what needed to be done to prepare. "We should go to Tanapa Junction in late March," he said one evening as they planned. "Snow will be melting by then, roads passable. We can get married there, stock up on supplies, maybe stay a few days." "That sounds perfect. Should we invite anyone? Post notices? Do you want to?" Lydia thought about it. "I think I would like to keep it small, just us and whoever performs the ceremony and maybe a witness or two. Unless you want more, small is fine with me. This is about us, not putting on a show for anyone. Although," Lydia said slowly, "I should write to my aunt again. Tell her about you, about the wedding. She was always kind to me, and I think she would want to know I am happy." "Then we will do that. Anything else you want?" "Just you," Lydia said simply. "That is all I have ever wanted." March arrived with the sound of dripping water and the smell of wet earth. The snow began to melt in earnest, revealing the brown grass and stone beneath. Flynn began preparing for the trip to town, repairing tack and checking supplies. Lydia washed and mended their best clothes, wanting to look proper for the wedding even if it would be simple. She also wrote a long letter to her aunt, telling her everything. About her father's abandonment, about Flynn's rescue, about falling in love, about the upcoming wedding. She sealed it carefully and added it to the packet of letters she would post when they reached town. In mid-March, with the trails finally clear enough for travel, they set out for Tanapa Junction. The ride took most of a day, Flynn and Lydia riding together as they had that first time. But now Lydia rode behind Flynn with her arms around his waist, her head resting against his broad back. She was no longer the frightened, abandoned woman he had found on the road. She was strong now, capable, certain of what she wanted. They arrived in Tanapa Junction in the late afternoon, and Flynn took them straight to the general store. Charles looked up from his ledger, did a double take, and then broke into a wide smile. "Well, I will be damned," he said. "Flynn Ingram and Miss Ashford, you two make it through the winter all right." "More than all right," Flynn said. "We are here to get married. Know where we can find a preacher." Charles's smile got even wider. "Pastor Johnson is still in town, staying at the boarding house. I am sure he would be happy to perform the ceremony." "When were you thinking?" "Tomorrow, if possible," Lydia said. "We do not need anything fancy." "Tomorrow it is, then. Congratulations to you both." Charles came around the counter and shook Flynn's hand, then Lydia's. "This is good news. Real good news." They spent the night at the boarding house, in separate rooms per Flynn's insistence on propriety. Lydia barely slept, too excited and nervous about the next day. When morning came, she dressed carefully in her best dress, brushed her hair until it shone, and tried to calm her racing heart. Flynn was waiting for her in the hallway, dressed in clean trousers and a new shirt, his long hair tied back neatly. He looked almost civilized, except for the wildness in his eyes and the raw strength of his frame. He looked like exactly what he was, a mountain man, strong and capable in hers. "You look beautiful," he said softly. "So do you," Lydia replied, and meant it. The wedding itself took place in the small church at the edge of town, with Pastor Johnson officiating and Charles and Doc Emerson serving as witnesses. It was simple and brief, just the essential vows, but to Lydia it was perfect. When Flynn slipped a plain gold band on her finger and said, "I do," she felt something settle deep in her soul, something that felt like coming home. "I do," she echoed, and meant it with every fiber of her being. "Then I pronounce you man and wife," Pastor Johnson said with a smile. "You may kiss your bride, Mr. Ingram." Flynn kissed her gently, sweetly, his large hands cradling her face like she was something precious. Lydia kissed him back, feeling joy bubble up inside her like champagne. She was married. To a man she loved, a man who loved her. A man who asked her opinion and valued her choices and treated her like an equal partner. It seemed almost too good to be true, but it was true. It was real. She was Mrs. Flynn Ingram now, and she had never been happier. They spent one more night in town, this time sharing a room as husband and wife. Flynn was gentle and patient with Lydia, who had no experience with such things. And she found that the physical side of marriage was as good as the emotional side, another kind of intimacy that brought them even closer together. In the morning, they posted Lydia's letters, stocked up on supplies, and headed back up into the mountains. Back home. Because the cabin was home now, truly home in a way nowhere else had ever been. Spring came fully to the mountains, and with it a kind of golden time. Flynn and Lydia worked together on expanding the cabin, adding a larger bedroom and a separate storage room. They planted a garden, tended the horses, and explored the surrounding wilderness. Flynn taught Lydia to fish, and she taught him to appreciate wildflowers. They made love under the stars and talked for hours about their dreams and plans. In late May, Lydia realized she had missed her monthly courses. She waited another few weeks to be sure, then told Flynn the news. "You are certain?" he asked, his face a mixture of joy and concern. "As certain as I can be without a doctor, but yes, I think I'm carrying our child." Flynn pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was made of glass. "How do you feel about it? Are you happy?" "I am terrified," Lydia admitted. "But yes, I am happy." "Are you?" I am going to be a father, Flynn said wonderingly. I never thought about it before, never imagined it. But now that it is happening, I cannot imagine anything better. Yes, I am happy. I am thrilled. He kissed her soundly, then immediately started fussing over her, asking if she needed anything, if she was tired, if she should be sitting down. Lydia laughed and pushed him away gently. I am pregnant, not dying. I can still work and move and do everything I have been doing. Women have been having babies forever, Flynn. Not my women, Flynn said stubbornly. Not my wife, and definitely not my baby. Your women, Lydia teased. How many do you have? Just you. Only you, forever you. He pulled her close again. I want you to be careful, all right? No heavy lifting, no overexerting yourself. I promise to be reasonable, Lydia said, but you have to promise not to treat me like I am made of glass. Can I treat you like you are made of precious china? No. Very valuable silk? No. How about the most important person in the world to me? Lydia's throat tightened with emotion. That I will accept. They decided to ride down to Tanapa Junction and have Doc Emerson confirm the pregnancy. The doctor examined Lydia and pronounced her healthy and about 2 months along, with the baby due in January. Everything looks good, Doc Emerson said. You are strong and healthy, Mrs. Ingram. I do not anticipate any problems, but if anything concerns you, you come see me right away, understood? Understood, Lydia agreed. Thank you, doctor. Flynn arranged with Doc Emerson to come up to the cabin a few weeks before the baby was due to stay through the birth and make sure everything went smoothly. The doctor agreed, and Flynn looked visibly relieved. They returned to the cabin and settled into their life with this new knowledge, this new joy. Flynn became even more protective, always checking on Lydia, always asking how she felt, always making sure she was comfortable. Lydia found it endearing rather than smothering, because she knew it came from love rather than a desire to control her. Summer was beautiful in the mountains, warm days and cool nights, the world exploding with green growth and wildflowers. Lydia's belly began to swell with the growing baby, and Flynn would spend hours with his hand resting on it, feeling for kicks and movements. "What do you want to name the baby?" he asked one evening as they sat outside watching the sunset. "I do not know. What do you want?" "I asked you first," Flynn said with a smile. Lydia laughed. "Always asking, what if we compromise? You pick the name if it is a boy, I pick if it is a girl. That works. Do you have a preference, boy or girl?" "Not really. As long as the baby is healthy, I will be happy. You?" "Same. Although I will admit, I find the idea of a daughter terrifying. I would have no idea how to raise a little girl." "You would figure it out," Lydia said confidently, "just like you figure everything else out. And you would ask her opinion on things and teach her that her choices matter, and she would grow up strong and confident because of it." Flynn pulled her close. "You have a lot of faith in me." "I have every faith in you. You are going to be an amazing father." Autumn came, painting the mountains gold and red and orange. Lydia's belly grew round and heavy, and she moved more slowly, tired more easily. But she was healthy, and the baby was active, kicking and turning, making its presence known. Flynn was attentive to the point of being slightly ridiculous, but Lydia loved him for it. In November, almost exactly a year after Flynn had found her abandoned on the road, Lydia sat outside the cabin wrapped in her fur cloak, watching the first snow of the season begin to fall. Flynn came and sat beside her, pulling her close against his warmth. "A year ago I found you," he said quietly. "Best day of my life." "Mine too," Lydia replied. "Everything changed that day. I changed that day. You became who you were always meant to be. We both did." They sat together watching the snow fall, and Lydia thought about everything that had happened in the past year. She had been abandoned by her father, rescued by a stranger, given choices for the first time in her life, fallen in love, married. And now she was about to become a mother. It was more change, more life than she had experienced in all the years before combined, and all because one man had asked her what she wanted. One man had treated her like her opinion mattered. One man had given her the freedom to choose. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For asking. For always asking. You have no idea what that did for me, what it still does for me. You gave me myself, Flynn. You gave me the freedom to figure out who I really am." Flynn kissed the top of her head. "You gave me something too. You gave me a reason to come down from the mountain to let someone in. You gave me a future I did not know I wanted. We saved each other, I think. I think we did." Winter settled in again, and as Lydia's due date approached, Doc Emerson arrived as promised to stay through the birth. The baby came in late January, during a blizzard even fiercer than the one that had marked Lydia and Flynn's first days together. The labor was long and hard, but Lydia was strong, and Doc Emerson knew his business. Flynn stayed with her the whole time, holding her hand, wiping her brow, asking what she needed. And when the baby finally arrived, a healthy boy with a shock of dark hair and a powerful set of lungs, Flynn took him in his large, gentle hands and looked at him with such wonder that Lydia felt tears stream down her face. "He is perfect," Flynn breathed. "Absolutely perfect." "What should we name him?" Lydia asked, exhausted but happy. Flynn looked at his son, then at his wife. "What do you think of Matthew? It was my brother's name, the one who died at Gettysburg. I would like to honor his memory." "Matthew Ingram," Lydia said, testing it. "I love it. Matthew it is." They brought the baby to her, and Lydia cradled him against her chest, feeling a love so fierce and immediate it took her breath away. Flynn sat beside them, one arm around Lydia and one hand resting gently on Matthew's tiny head, and looked like the happiest man in the world. "Thank you," he said softly. "For him, for everything." "Thank you," Lydia replied, "for giving me the life I always wanted but never knew I could have." Doc Emerson stayed for a week, making sure both Lydia and the baby were healthy and thriving. Then he headed back to town, leaving the new little family alone in their mountain home. Flynn was devoted to both his wife and son, constantly checking on them, always asking what Lydia needed, splitting his time between caring for them and keeping up with the necessary work. Matthew was a good baby, healthy and strong like his father. As the months passed, he grew rapidly, and Lydia and Flynn settled into their roles as parents with surprising ease. Flynn was patient and gentle with the baby, singing to him in his deep voice and carrying him around the cabin tucked against his broad chest. "You are a natural at this," Lydia told him one spring evening as she watched Flynn rocking Matthew to sleep. "I am just doing what seems right." "And asking for help when I do not know," Flynn replied. Same as always, spring came again, bringing new life to the mountains and to the Ingram family. Matthew began to smile and coo, recognizing his parents and responding to them. Lydia had never been happier, never felt more fulfilled. She had the family she had always wanted, the partner she had never dared to dream of, and the freedom to be herself. One sunny day in May, as Lydia was working in the garden while Matthew napped in a basket nearby and Flynn repaired the corral fence, a rider appeared on the trail leading up to the cabin. Lydia's heart jumped with alarm, but Flynn straightened and waved, apparently recognizing the visitor. "It is just the mail rider," he called to her. "Comes up every few months with letters." The rider delivered a packet of mail and accepted coffee and cornbread before heading back down the mountain. Flynn brought the letters to Lydia, and she sorted through them with interest. Most were for Flynn, business correspondence from town. But there was one addressed to Mrs. Lydia Ingram in a handwriting she recognized. "It is from my aunt," she said, her hands shaking slightly as she opened it. The letter was long and warm, full of love and relief. Her aunt had received Lydia's letters and was overjoyed to hear that she was alive, married, and happy. She wrote that she had confronted Lydia's father about abandoning her, and their relationship had fractured as a result. But she also wrote that she was proud of Lydia for choosing her own path, for finding happiness on her own terms. She also included news that made Lydia's breath catch. Lydia's father had died of a heart attack in March. Her aunt had tried to reach Lydia before the funeral, but the letters had not arrived in time. She assured Lydia that she need not feel guilty about his death, that he had made his own choices and would have to answer for them. Lydia read the letter twice, then set it down, unsure how she felt. Relief, sadness, guilt, some mixture of all three. Bad news, Flynn asked gently, sitting down beside her. My father died. In March. Flynn put his arm around her shoulders. I am sorry. Even though he wronged you, he was still your father. It is all right to feel whatever you feel about this. I do not know what I feel, Lydia admitted. Part of me is sad because he was my father and I loved him despite everything. But part of me is also relieved because now I never have to worry about him trying to control me again or take me away from you. Both of those feelings are valid, Flynn said. You can grieve him and be relieved he is gone at the same time. Feelings do not have to make logical sense. Lydia leaned against his solid warmth, grateful for his understanding. My aunt wants to visit, maybe this summer. She wants to meet you and Matthew. What do you think about that? Do you want her to visit? Lydia considered the question, taking her time as Flynn had taught her. Yes, she finally said. I would like that. She was always kind to me and I would like her to see how happy I am now. Then we will make it happen. I will send word that she is welcome anytime she can make the journey. They wrote back immediately, inviting Lydia's aunt to visit and providing detailed instructions for reaching the cabin. Then they settled back into their daily routine, the rhythm of mountain life that Lydia had come to love. Summer brought long, warm days and the endless work of maintaining their homestead. Matthew grew rapidly, becoming more alert and interactive. Flynn taught him to laugh by making funny faces, and Lydia would sit and watch them together, her heart so full she thought it might burst. In August, Lydia's aunt arrived, accompanied by a guide from Tanapa Junction. She was a plump, cheerful woman in her 50s, with her sister's kind eyes and warm smile. She took one look at the cabin, at Flynn's protective stance beside his wife, at the baby on Lydia's hip, and burst into tears. Oh, my dear girl, she said, pulling Lydia into a hug. Look at you. You are glowing with happiness. This is exactly what I always wanted for you. She stayed for 2 weeks, and those weeks were full of joy and laughter. She told stories about Lydia's mother, shared family history Lydia had never heard, and doted on baby Matthew. She also took Flynn aside one day and apparently gave him her blessing and thanks because he came back looking pleased. Your aunt approves of me, he told Lydia that night. Of course she does. Anyone can see how happy we are. She said I am good for you, that you have become the person you were always meant to be. She is right. You helped me find myself. When her aunt left, it was with promises to visit again and invitations for them to come stay with her if they ever traveled to Missouri. Lydia waved goodbye from the porch, Matthew in her arms and Flynn beside her, and felt completely at peace. The years that followed were full and rich. Matthew grew into a sturdy, curious boy with his father's strength and his mother's quick mind. When he was 3, Lydia gave birth to a daughter they named Grace, a sweet-tempered child with her father's dark eyes. 2 years after that came another son, Thomas, who was all energy and mischief. Flynn remained the man he had always been. Strong, protective, kind, and always asking what Lydia wanted, what she thought, what she preferred. He taught all their children the same lesson, raising them to think for themselves and make their own choices while also understanding responsibility and respect. Lydia flourished in ways she never could have imagined. She became an expert in mountain living, able to hunt and trap alongside Flynn. She also started a small business making herbal remedies, using plants she gathered from the mountains and recipes Doc Emerson had taught her. People would ride up from Tonopah Junction to buy her tonics and salves, and she felt proud to contribute financially to the family. But more than any of that, she was simply happy. Happy in her marriage, happy in her life, happy in herself. She made choices every day, large and small, and Flynn respected every single one. They built a partnership based on mutual respect and love, and that foundation never wavered. Sometimes, on quiet evenings when the children were asleep and they sat together by the fire, Flynn would ask her if she ever regretted how her life had turned out. Did she ever wish she had gone to California or back east? Did she ever miss civilization? And Lydia would always give him the same answer. This is exactly where I want to be, with you, with our children in these mountains. You gave me the most precious gift anyone ever has. You gave me the freedom to choose, and I chose this. I chose you. And I would make the same choice every single day for the rest of my life. And Flynn would pull her close and tell her he loved her, and she would feel that same warm certainty she had felt from the beginning. This was right. This was home. This was exactly where she was meant to be. Years turned into decades. The children grew up strong and independent, shaped by parents who taught them to think for themselves. Matthew became a skilled tracker and guide like his father. Grace married a kind farmer and settled in the valley below, close enough to visit often. Thomas became a veterinarian, combining his love of animals with his quick mind. Through it all, Flynn and Lydia remained devoted to each other, their love deepening with every passing year. They grew old together in their mountain cabin, their hair turning gray, their movements slowing, but their connection as strong as ever. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Flynn gave Lydia a hand-carved wooden box filled with small treasures. A pressed flower from their first spring together, a button from the shirt she had mended for him, a piece of her ruined shoes from the night he found her, and a folded piece of paper. Lydia unfolded it carefully and found a list in Flynn's careful handwriting. It was titled Things Lydia Chose and listed hundreds of choices she had made over their 30 years together, from the mundane to the momentous. What to eat for breakfast, where to plant the garden. Names for their children, whether to expand the cabin, how to celebrate holidays, what color to paint the shutters. You kept track of all these, she asked, tears streaming down her face. Not all of them. There are too many for that. But I wanted to remember, to remind you of how far you have come. Flynn took her hand. When I found you, you did not know how to make choices because no one had ever let you. But look at you now. You have spent 30 years choosing your own life, building your own happiness. I am so proud of you, Lydia, so proud of the woman you have become. I could not have done it without you, Lydia said, her voice thick with emotion. You showed me it was possible. You gave me the space and time and support to find myself. And you gave me a reason to live instead of just surviving. You gave me a family, a purpose, a future. We did this together. They held each other as the sun set over the mountains, two people who had found each other in the wilderness and built a life better than either had dared to imagine. Lydia thought back to that terrified girl standing on the road with her trunk and bleeding feet, abandoned and alone. And she sent a silent thank you to that version of herself for being brave enough to trust a strange mountain man who had asked what she wanted. That question had changed everything. It had opened a door to a life of freedom and choice and love. And Lydia had walked through that door and never looked back. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Flynn asked one more question, the same question he had asked thousands of times over their life together. "What do you want to do tonight, love?" And Lydia gave the same answer she always did, the truest answer she knew. "I want to be exactly where I am, with exactly who I am with. I want this. I want us. Always." Flynn smiled and kissed her, and they went inside their cabin together, home in every sense of the word. They had built a beautiful life together, one choice at a time, one question at a time, one day at a time. And it was perfect. It was exactly what they both wanted. It was everything.